And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, is my co-host Laraib. And we are here, Laraib. 1 week of NFL action is in the books. All 32 teams have played their first game of the season, and we are here to break it all down, Laraib. Biggest takeaway of the weekend in general: NFL is back, and I'm so excited. We
Same.
had so
Yes,
many
same.
amazing games, and there's just so much excitement now. Even if your team lost, there's still, you're either jumping off the ship, or if your team won, you're going to the Super Bowl. So we're here to be your calming presence to break it all down for you in today's Tuesday episode, Larab. Anything you want to say before we hop into our picks?
Just a little tiny little fiddle for both of my fantasy teams this week. They both lost, and my Seahawks lost. So tough week, Lewis. But this is what the NFL season's about. It's the highs and the lows, baby. So this is
Got to
what
say
we're here
even
for.
keel.
So, Lewis,
Absolutely.
with that, let's get into our picks. And
And another
oh
loss
my
on the weekend,
goodness.
Larab. Not
This
a
my
great
yeah,
weekend.
my fourth loss for the weekend. And it was the Chiefs who screwed me on this one, Lewis. My lock, Super Bowl champions at home, Andy Reid, week one, Patrick Mahomes, undefeated as a starter in week one. All that down the drain, Lewis, for me in this week one. You eke it out with a nice dub. The Jets were a nice pick for you on Monday night, and that was a big difference in this one too.
Yeah, I mean, we've lost both of our locks and upsets. I mean, gee, we'll get into Seattle. I know you want to get into that. But man, the Giants, I mean, talk about an upset, more like an upset night. That game was awful. The Giants' effort was putrid, and we'll get into it. But, I was resurrected by the New York Jets. But yeah, good week so far. I think we did a little bit better than we did week one last year in the picks. But speaking of the New York Jets, the saying that goes, you won the battle, but lost the war, cannot be overstated when it comes to this, how Jets fans are feeling right now. What a game last night. I mean, first off, just, macrocosm view, that was a really awesome game. I mean, with the punt return for a touchdown at the end, the excitement in that arena on 9/11, just the emotions with everything that happened in that game for, this undrafted rookie and Xavier Gibson to bring that to the house in overtime to beat your division rivals in the Bills at home was truly a special event. But now it's time to address the elephant in the room, or the elephant that has left the room for the season, which is Aaron Rodgers. We give him a lot of crap here on the show, and mostly it's from a hatred because he's beat our teams a lot. We've beat him a lot, so it's a back and forth thing. But yeah, he's out for the season with a torn Achilles. Truly heartbreaking because how much we really don't like Aaron Rodgers. You want to see him play. He's always going to be entertaining. He's always a topic, and you just feel for him. You feel for Jets fans. The promise they had for this season, all the hype going in. I was excited. I was buying in. I told you that, going into that game, I picked the Jets because I started to drink the Kool-Aid. I bought into the defense. I bought into the running backs. And I really thought, with Aaron Rodgers, this is going to be a special team. And now, I mean, as a Jets fan, you watch that game, Laura, and you see all these positives, and then you see Zach Wilson in a quarterback. So what was your initial reaction to seeing Aaron Rodgers going down?
Yeah, really unfortunate, Lewis. I know you and I love to hate on him, but that's when he's playing. Whenever he loses, that's the part that's fun about it, not when he's not on the field. So that's really unfortunate. And you look at this Jets team who are built to win now, Lewis. You talk about all
Yeah.
the pieces that they have, and now the speculation on the quarterback market is, are they going to get Jameis Winston? Are they going to try to trade for Kyler Murray? Your boy Carson Wentz is still out there, Lewis. Maybe he can go into town. But the whole thing was, we got Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson is no longer our starting quarterback. That was a huge thing. We don't want Zach Wilson as our quarterback, and now he has to lead those group of guys. And he already knows what the type of things they would say about him in the locker room and about his performance on the field. He even showed you on Monday night this awful interception in the middle of the field to our boy Matt Milano. But it's going to be difficult for this Jets team. But I think if they can play solid defense all year long, like they played last night, they're still going to be in it for the AFC East division. But of course, Rodgers going down is going to make a really tough situation for them.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the Jets are going to pivot off of this because, I mean, they built this team around Aaron Rodgers. you bring in, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, these guys who have familiarity with Aaron Rodgers within his style of offense. And that's what you expect to be the whole season. Now, I saw something interesting. That offensive line, we knew coming in was going to be shaky. And Aaron Rodgers, 39, going into his age 40 season. I mean, with that offensive line, the odds of him getting injured this season were pretty high to begin with. Now, of course, you don't expect it on the fourth play, and you don't expect it to be a season-ending injury, which, I mean, is just awful for the Jets. But, like, the way they set this up was pretty haphazard. Now, Rodgers was saying going into the season that they had fixed things, that he was feeling confident. And this injury is not on the offensive line. It's a freak injury. It could happen to anybody. We saw it happen to J.K. Dobbins on Sunday as well for the Ravens. So, I mean, it's hard to see where they go from here. Robert Saleh came out and said, Zach Wilson's our guy. He's the plan going forward. But, Tim Boyle is your technically third string quarterback. Well, he's on the practice squad, and you do not trust him. And Zach Wilson, he was taking some pretty big hits in that game as well, Laraib. So that you need some type of contingency plan as well. So whether it's a, solid veteran, like you mentioned, like one of those guys, or you take a shot on somebody, like I heard maybe the Cowboys do a flip for flip and they give them Trey Lance, or you go somewhere crazy with the quarterback market. I think, honestly, if I'm the Jets front office, there's no name out there. And I heard like Matt Stafford's name out there. Like, you're not getting a starting quarterback. If there's and why would you want Matt Stafford anyway? That's a whole different thing. But I know he played well, but another injury prone old quarterback behind that offensive line. What's going to happen next, Jets? And they play a lot of tough pass rushes coming down the pipe over here. So this is going to be a really tough stretch for this Jets team. I think the plan is you stick with Zach. You get him a Joe Flacco type competent guy with a lot of starts under his belt quarterback like they had last year. Maybe a Carson Wentz if you want to trade for a Jameis Winston, that type of quarterback. Do not let them get Carson Wentz, Laurel. Do not let them get – oh, man. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. But you bring in that type of guy to kind of remedy. But ultimately, I think this is going to be Zach Wilson's team this season. And let's see, he matured under Rodgers, what people said. He looked pretty decent in the preseason. And they have a better team. Like, you watched that defense last night. That defense, which was really good last year, looked even better against the Bills. And that running game, Brees looked amazing coming off that ACL injury. And then you bring in Dalvin Cook as well. They have a really good running game. They have a great defense. Garrett Wilson made an insane catch. They have decent weapons on the outside. So you don't even really need a game-changing quarterback to make this a decent potential playoff team. But I think the hard part for the Jets is that's probably the ceiling for you as a team now. There's no deep playoff run. There's no Super Bowl aspirations once Aaron Rodgers goes down. So we'll see what happens. And for Aaron Rodgers' future, Laura, what does he do now? Like, if you're the Jets, 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles, do you try to run it back with him? Obviously, if he wants to, I feel like you have to. But where would you go now if you're Rodgers and the Jets front office with him?
Well, Lewis, they did restructure his contract coming over from Green Bay, making it a little bit more team friendly. So I think they already had in mind, he might, be here for this year and probably be there for next year. And so they have, this 1 to 2 year opportunity to go and get that Super Bowl. So I think they ride with him again next season because, you're never really going to know what you could have had this season if you don't try again with him next season. So I think they stick with him. We'll see where they go from this season, depending on how well Zach Wilson does. Because, he drafted over there, played a couple seasons. He's been awful, but like you said, maybe he's matured a little bit. Probably not. Milf Hunter, Zach Wilson. We'll see what he can do this year for the Jets franchise, Lewis. But let's quickly, just for a little bit, flip it on over to the other side of the ball. We saw Josh Allen with 4 really bad turnovers, Lewis. And it's been, this Bills team has Super Bowl aspirations for the past 3 or 4 years now, and it's always come down to this team not coming up in those big moments. And Lewis, I think it really just comes down to execution. They have the playmakers on both sides of the ball, and it comes down to Josh Allen not making he's a veteran quarterback now. Lewis, this is his 5th year. He's not a rookie anymore, but he's still making those rookie mistakes, launching those bombs down the field, in double coverage, picking up a fumble and then running into your own guy and fumbling it for the other team to pick up. It's just these careless mistakes that he makes, Lewis. And I know it just drives his offensive coordinator, just gives him headaches.
I mean, that's the thing right there, Laraib, is the offensive coordinator. Ken Dorsey, he's not a bad offensive coordinator, but we saw when Josh Allen was his best, when he had Brian Daboll there, and Brian Daboll gave him a sense of security. And yeah, he has these wow plays all the time that scream off the screen, but what makes Patrick Mahomes so good? Patrick Mahomes has the ability. He can do everything Josh Allen can do. And you can argue Josh Allen has more natural talent than Patrick Mahomes, but Patrick Mahomes takes what the defense gives him. If it's 3rd and long and he's getting flushed out of the pocket, Mahomes will simply throw it away or take something underneath and move on, to another down. Josh Allen, what infuriates so many people who watch him is I feel like he knows he's special and he thinks in his head every play could be the greatest play ever. And he just launches it. And he thinks like, I don't know, he's this superhuman athlete who can just defy all the basic laws of football where it's live to another down, take what the defense gives you, play within a system. And I just don't feel like he understands that. He's gotten so much hype. He's gotten all this, he's been gassed up by the offense in the past few years because let's be honest. I mean, he's been their offense the past few years. So I feel like he feels like it's on himself to do everything for this team. And against really good defenses, you can't get away with that. And we saw that in the game with the 3 interceptions and the fumble at the end, Laraib. So it's infuriating for Bills fans, I'm sure. That's why you see guys like Diggs just constantly bothered. And I mean, I don't know. He doesn't have to play the Jets every week, which is good. It seems like they have a good plan for him. But him and Ken Dorsey need to sit down and figure out how to do the easy stuff. Now, that they tried getting a run game in with James Cook, and they looked pretty good in the first half, but they kind of went away from it. You need to rely on your run game, work the intermediate, and sometimes when you're flushing out of the pocket, Josh, you're a great athlete, but get down, run out of bounds, don't put the ball in danger, and live to another down. If every play ends in a kick, either a punt, a field goal, or an extra point, that's perfect. No need to turn over. No need to do the superhuman. If you have 3 superhuman plays a game, perfect. The other 25, let's hand the ball off and let's take what the defense gives us. And I think that'll be a good thing for success. But so far, rough start for the Bills, losing that game to the Jets in that fashion, 0-1. But Laraib, let's go ahead and move on to our Sunday stretch of games. Starting off for the Saints corner, I'm going to quickly talk about the Saints, and we'll get into the Seahawks later in our overreactions. But Saints win a game at home against the Titans, 16-15. Ugly defensive game. We just didn't see a lot of execution from either offenses. I mean, pretty good field goal units. Hey, if there's one big silver lining for Tennessee fans, Nick Folk looks like a beast, right? But hey, how about Blake Grupe as well for Saints fans? I mean, you cut Will Lutz, or you trade Will Lutz, which that looks like a pretty good trade, seeing him go to Denver and miss a bunch of kicks and extra points. But I mean, what I liked, the defense looked really good. Now, we gave up a lot in the intermediary, but it kind of reminds you of those Patriots defense back in the day, the bend, don't break, where they allow you to get all that middle stuff, but in the red zone and deep down the field, they are standing tight. I love the secondary, how it looks. The pass rush looked really good, albeit against a pretty haphazard offensive line from the Tennessee Titans. And Ryan Tannehill was throwing you biscuits all day. We had 3 interceptions. We probably could have had 6 based on like some of the dropped interceptions and just errant throws by Ryan Tannehill, who, I mean, we're not going to talk about him today, but I know we'll get to him later this season when we're talking about Will Levis or Malik Willis making their first start. But I mean, the offense definitely had some kinks in it. We were talking earlier, you mentioned the red zone offense didn't look that good. I think a lot of it is just chemistry at this point, is getting those reps in, figuring timing in the red zone is a huge thing. When you see guys like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, they seem so automatic in the red zone. I feel like once he gets reps in with a lot of these guys, and it seems like he trusts Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed. We saw him that huge bomb down the left sideline, basically to ice the game. I mean, that's what Saints fans were hoping for when you bring in a guy like Derek Carr. Andy Dalton is not making that throw. Jameis Winston might make it, but he'll overshoot it by 10 yards. And Derek Carr kind of gives you that. It's not Drew Brees. He's not Drew Brees. Don't get it twisted. Derek Carr is a middle of the pack. On his best days, he could be the 8th best quarterback. On the worst days, he could be the 20th worst quarterback in the NFL. But he gives you a sense of stability within an offense that you didn't have the past 2 years. And I think over time, this unit's going to look a lot better, Laraib.
Yeah, for sure. It looked like he had some great chemistry with Chris Olave, which is really nice to see. Olave with over 100 receiving yards in that one. Awesome for my fantasy team who still lost this week. A big thing was the questions with the run game, and I just really didn't like it that much this week with Jamal Adams. Of course, when Kendra Miller comes back and Alvin Kamara comes off a suspension, that'll be much, much better. And just like you're saying, Michael Thomas had an outstanding, first quarter, but it's going to be depending on their chemistry. And when you have big targets like Juwan Johnson down there in the red zone, you'll expect to see a lot more touchdowns from the Saints offense. And, looking at this in a bigger scale, it was really good for a Saints team. When you look at the NFC South in whole, maybe not the best division this year, and the NFC as a whole as well, the Saints are looking really good this year. And I think they have a, really good chance of making the playoffs and maybe making some noise.
I mean, all of a sudden, Falcons going to win. The Buccaneers get a surprise win. This division might be a little tough, but we play the Panthers next week. I'm not going to give my prediction just yet, but we'll get into that in our next episode. I'm feeling good going into it. But, Laraib, let's move into our overreaction statement. We're going to pose each other some overreactions, and it's on the other person to tell whether it's an overreaction or pretty on point. So I'll start with you, Laraib. After a huge performance from Tyreek Hill and the Dolphins offense, maybe it's not so much Jalen Waddle. The Dolphins go on the road and beat the Chargers. Tua Tagovailoa puts up over 400 passing yards. Tyreek Hill puts over 200 passing yards, and they win an absolute great game on Sunday. So I ask you, Laraib, are the Miami Dolphins the best offense in the NFL?
Lewis, I have to say yes here. I mean, what an absolute performance by this team. Tyreek Hill is, we can say definitively the best offensive player in football, Lewis. Just the performance he had, that touchdown over J.C. Jackson to win the game. Tua came out here to prove everybody wrong. All the questions about him, maybe retiring this offseason, a lot of people mocking his jiu-jitsu training to take hits better. He came out there and proved everybody wrong. Now, I will say, Lewis, playing up against the Chargers in SoFi Stadium, basically, road game every year for my boy Justin Herbert. Goddamn, can we get any help over there? But that's for another day. But
defensive coach.
Tua came out there and lit up that team. And I think, Lewis, even without a great rushing attack, they don't have any big names back there. I think their air raid offense is what the future of the NFL is. And this is what they do. Speedsters on the outside. And of course, your guy Braxton Berrios in the intermediate. I think this team is going to end up with the best offense this year.
I'm going to say yes, but it's a tentative yes. Because yes, they gave us the best performance. And I think on the outside, I was very impressed, not just with Hill and Waddle, of course, but those intermediate guys that they got, River Craycraft, Braxton Berrios, that really just have been really solid slot guys for their entire career. And then, Slife, the tight end, looked pretty good as well. So it seems like Tua was very comfortable and confident in all the receivers he had in the passing game. But the thing that concerns me is the lack of balance in this offense. Rushing the ball, Mostert had 37 yards, I believe, leading the team in rushing yards. And, I don't believe in this offensive line missing their 2 starting tackles. Teron Armstead didn't even play in this game. And it's crazy that you're going up against a Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and you gave up 0 sacks. Now, I don't know if that's a testament to this Dolphins offensive line, maybe getting some more just the depth on it, and they're only going to get better in pass protection, or if it's more of a slight to some older pass rushers who are maybe their name carries a lot more value than their game does.
Nope.
That's a bar right there. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like it with Tyreek Hill. He just does. He opens up an offense like no other player in the league. We both agree he is the best offensive player, non-quarterback in the league. This is the value he gives you that opens up the entire field. And I just don't I don't want to make this a Chargers thing, but the way they played him was egregious. And for Brandon Staley, man, after that playoff game last year, to give this type of defensive performance in your home opener, I mean, that was a disgrace. That he should be ashamed, and it will. We talked about the first coach fired, Laraib. Brandon Staley is knocking on that door because I liked what they did offensively. I like the all right, but that's Chargers stock. We'll get into that in a later episode. But I mean, I liked what I saw from the Niners offense. I liked how Brock Purdy worked in that offensive system. We didn't get to see a lot from the Cowboys offense because that game would just turned super quickly. And then the Chiefs, once they get Travis Kelce back, they were the best offense last year. It's hard for me to say that when he comes back, that they won't, retake the mantle with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. But right now, I'm going to agree with you, Laura. I don't think it's an overreaction.
Yeah, if Tua can play all 17 games this year,
That's
I think
true.
they have a very good shot of finishing this year with the number one offense, Lewis. But let me ask you something. My Green Bay Packers, without Aaron Rodgers, will win the NFC North with Jordan Love.
You know what, Laura? I've kind of gone back and forth on this one, but I'm going to agree with you, Laura. And I mean, I really loved what I saw out of Jordan Love, no pun intended, this past Sunday. I mean, he looked comfortable. That offensive line was just dominant over the Bears. They were able to run the ball effectively. And Jordan Love, even without Christian Watson, just found his guys down the field, didn't do too much, played within Matt LaFleur's offense. And that was the thing that we were talking about in our preview is Matt LaFleur was saying, without Aaron Rodgers, now I can really show off my type of offense. And Jordan Love can be the conduit to run that offense. And he looked very composed. He looked extremely sharp on Sunday against I called it. That Bears defense is atrocious. But he looked sharp. He looked like he could command this team. And then that defense looked amazing. I really like the secondary. That front seven was getting so much pressure. I mean, you're talking Quay Walker had an interception. Rashawn Gary always in the backfield. They just have dogs in that front seven. And that's what the Packers do best. Even when you think that there may not be a great team, they're always going to have stability. They're going to have a good front seven. They're going to be good playing in adversity and bad weather on the road. They always have that chip on their shoulder. And they, I just was very impressed in how they played. Now, my other option would have been the Lions. We were both very impressed how the Lions came out at Kansas City. But I just have more significant questions about that Lions team than I do this Packers team. I know I like Jared Goff more than I do Jordan Love. But with the support around Jordan Love, that offensive line, I think these two teams are going to have some great games this year that I'm super excited to see. But I'm going to give the slight lean to the Packers, Laraib.
Yeah, Lewis, 4 sacks on Jordan Love. On Justin Fields from that defense. They're just an overall better team, in my opinion, than this Lions team. The Lions only scored 2 touchdowns on offense and what was supposed to be, something that is a really high-powered offense. Now, I expect Jahmyr Gibbs to get more touches in the coming weeks, and we'll see how that progresses. But from Jared Goff, he's solid, and I agree with you. He's better than Jordan Love. But I think Jordan Love, with the receivers that he has, and just the offensive line, both teams have great offensive lines. In my opinion, I'll say the Lions actually have a better offensive line, but I think Matt LaFleur gives an edge in just his offensive play calling over the Lions. And the Lions, so they came out and had a great defensive performance against the Chiefs. But I think, the Chiefs dropped 10% of their passes, Lewis, no Travis Kelce. So I don't want to be the clown that says, oh, asterisk on this game, asterisk on that game. But you kind of have to just take it into effect, Lewis, a little bit about the drops that they had and no Travis Kelce. So in my opinion, I think this Packers team is going to win this division. The Vikings, of course, are always going to be there with Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins. But we saw how bad that defense played against a Baker Mayfield in his first start.
Awful.
Against the Buccaneers. And we'll talk about the Vikings team coming up a little bit. They play Thursday night, but I really like this Packers team to win the division, Lewis.
Yeah, I don't know. Whenever you talk it out and you're kind of going through position by position, you're like, oh yeah, Packers have a good offensive line. Lions do too. I don't know. Play calling, it's like Matt LaFleur is good. Yeah, Ben Johnson is too. And you're going back and forth. I feel like the biggest thing for me is the defense. I agree with you. The secondary for the Packers is just so much more experienced. And I trust them a lot more against some of the more elite offenses in the NFL. The Lions had a good showing against it, like you said, not full power Chiefs team, but I'm excited for these two teams to battle off. And I'm not even going to mention the Vikings or the Bears. Definitely not the Bears. But let's go ahead and move on to our next overreaction, Laraib. And this might be a tough one for you, but has the clock hit 12 and Geno Smith, quarterbacks of the Seattle Seahawks, has he turned back into a pumpkin as the Seahawks get demolished in a home opener? And I would argue the most stunning outcome of any game this weekend, Laraib.
Well, Lewis, we know Geno Smith got paid this offseason. Maybe not the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Maybe not the second most highest paid quarterback in the NFL, but $100 million for a quarterback who was considered a bust after his first couple of years in the NFL, Lewis. I'm sure he's enjoying the money that he made, and he definitely earned it from his play from last season. But this performance that he had in this one really, really scared me, Lewis, like you mentioned, has it finally come to 12 o'clock for him. Now, we'll say, Lewis, Aaron Donald was playing in this one. Of course, he's going to dominate any offensive line. We saw Abraham Lucas coming in and out of the lineup, and Charles Cross also got banged up on, a toe injury. And then the Seahawks signed Jason Peters today, even though he's 41 years old, Lewis. And so it looks like this offensive line is maybe taking a step back from last season, and that's something you don't want to see. Now, of course, we drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba with our first overall pick, and so we thought, this trio of wide receivers, Lewis, would be dominating this league. And after so much offseason hype, Lewis, this was really embarrassing loss. But I'm going to have to wait till next week, Lewis. This was a divisional game. The Rams are always going to get up for this one whenever they're facing us. But next week, I think, in the coming weeks, when we face the Lions, we face the Cardinals, when we face the 49ers, we'll see, how far Geno Smith really has come down.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 8 catches for 70 yards from that trio of receivers. And the game script was just, it was just very poor. We always joke about the Pete Carroll run, pass, run, pass, but they had the most 3-and-outs across the entire NFL in week 1 against a just not great defense. Give Aaron Donald his flowers, but there's only so much one man can do. And you mentioned the offensive line struggles, which was just very uncharacteristic. Yeah, the 2 tackles got hurt. It hopefully doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But Geno Smith just didn't seem sharp. It didn't seem like these guys were really getting open that well. And to your credit, Kenneth Walker, 12 carries for 64 yards. That you'll take that. He had a pretty good game on the ground. But my biggest question was this defense. You got ran over 92 yards, which honestly isn't that crazy for the Rams, but just the constant pounding, it just seemed like that front seven couldn't take it, and you couldn't get pressure. That was my biggest problem.
Yeah,
actually.
0 sacks on Stafford, Lewis.
Right, the lack of pressure from the Seahawks defense, and I mentioned it in the draft when Jalen Carter was sitting right there, and I know you don't want to hear this, but when they took Devon Witherspoon, and I know he didn't play, I don't know how much of an impact he would have made in this game, but allowing a quarterback like Matt Stafford, who is still a fantastic quarterback, that much time to, look down the field and really dot you up, that's always going to be trouble. It doesn't matter who the receivers are. Tutu Atwell, Puka Nacua, Van Jefferson, they were having field days against the Seattle defense. Guys like Reek Woolen, the secondary probably could have played better, but when you're not getting that pass rush, there's only so much a defense could do. So you give Matthew Stafford his flowers, but there are some big questions from the Seattle front seven that I don't think are going to be able to get addressed. You have some promising pass rushers on this team. It's just like, Nwosu, Mafe. It was a very troubling. And then Draymond Jones, you pay him, you give him a lot of money for an interior presence. And I don't even know if we heard his name the entire afternoon. It just was a very disappointing performance from the Seattle defense, Rob.
Yeah, Lewis, also Jerron Reed, who came back to the Seahawks this offseason, he mentioned in a press conference before the season, this Seahawks front seven is going to be different from years past. We are going to have some pressure this year. We're going to stop the run this year. And they just did not live up to that this week, Lewis. And of course, Jamal Adams not being there, like you meant, Witherspoon not being there, those are going to be big losses. But if you can't get pressure on the quarterback, that's what's going to happen. Now, I'm expecting Jamal Adams. Hopefully he can play in the box this season a lot more, have another 7-sack year for him if he's, playing all games and he's ready and healthy to go, Lewis. But this was just an embarrassing loss for my Seahawks week 1 against a divisional opponent. And it's not going to get easier next week, Lewis. Now we face the Lions, who have an outstanding or supposedly outstanding offense. We'll see how they can pick up after only 14 points in week 1. But Lewis, let me ask you this for our next overreaction. Are the Giants, led by Daniel Jones, the worst team in the NFC East?
I mean, if you're giving me a 1 game sample size, they're the worst team in the NFL. But you have to throw context in there. This game, now I'll give the Giants this. This game script went completely out of the window. They had a pretty decent opening drive. I mean, I really liked what I saw from Daniel Jones on the ground. It seemed like they were kind of pushing around this Cowboys front seven, not allowing them to just key off on Daniel Jones, and just that running game really kind of make them humble at the point of attack. And they got into field goal range, and then you have the blocked field goal, goes down for a touchdown. Cowboys go down and make it a 10-point game like that. And it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And this is a Giants team, Laraib, where if they get down in these games, and we saw this last year as well, they just cannot win with with how they play offense. Daniel Jones, he got paid all this money because they believed in him, but he is not a good passer. He's never been, and Brian Daboll can put up as much duct tape and, stick them as he can, but you are not going to be able to fix what Daniel Jones is not, and he is not a capable passer. And, if you want to make an argument for Daniel Jones, they really didn't help him at all in the receiving game either. I mean, the first catch from a receiver, Laraib, didn't come until the third quarter for this New York Giants team. And Darren Waller, he was your big shiny acquisition. He had no impact on this game. And if you're a team in 2023, you have to be able to have a high volume passing game in some context, or you will just not survive in some of these games against the elite teams in the NFL. And when you let a Cowboys defensive front, which has that much talent, just key off on Daniel Jones the entire game, it's going to cause so much trouble because he's not a 2-read quarterback. He's not a, extend the play, make something happen quarterback. He's a 1-read, get out of the pocket, use his legs type of guy. And the Giants just stifled that. And they proved that the Giants cannot play with them at home. Now, I do not think they're the worst in the NFC East. I was not impressed by the Commanders' performance against the Cardinals on Sunday. But I don't know, Laraib. The Giants have a lot of questions because in a game like this, you can argue, they got down early and they quit. You're quitting when it's a home divisional game, week 1 in your home opener? That's pathetic. I mean, that you are letting your city down, your team down, your owner down. You were letting everybody down with just a piss poor effort, Laraib. It really was embarrassing that our first Sunday night of the season was that garbage.
Yeah, Lewis, and you look at this Giants offense, I don't think, they're not the Chiefs, right? They brought in Darren Waller thinking he was going to be Travis Kelce for them, and they could have nobodies on the outside, but that's just not the case, Lewis. You can't replicate Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And Darren Waller, he had some good seasons over there with the Las Vegas Raiders, but the last 2 seasons over there for him in Las Vegas were awful, and they thought they could just bring him in over here to New York, and, he's going to be Travis Kelce 2.0. That's just not how it works, Lewis, with Daniel Jones. And the receivers, you have Isaiah Hodgins, Lewis. You're throwing to Lawrence Cager. Darius Slayton has been in the NFL a long time, and he's been, all right, but he cannot carry an offense. And when you're facing Trayvon Diggs, when you're facing Stephon Gilmore, when you're facing Javon Curse, and when you're facing Micah Parsons, that just does not cut it, Lewis. And they got embarrassed. Now, going back to the main question, are they the worst team? No, because like you mentioned, this Commanders team played awful against the Cardinals, and the Cardinals had a chance to win the game on their last drive. And so, yeah, that's just absolutely astonishing. So, no, they don't take the mantle for last place. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's just an embarrassing loss. And how do they bounce back from this, Lewis? Because, you lose to a divisional opponent 40-0 on opening night on 9/11 Memorial Weekend. And I can't believe it. I don't have anything to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a game where Jets fans might be really upset, but I mean, the whole city of New York is just sullen. I mean, 9/11, yeah, but these 2 teams collapsing could be worse than the Towers. No, I'm kidding. Cut that out. But no, I mean, to the point of the Commanders, it's at least they have competent weapons. At least they have some sort of, you bring in Eric Bieniemy, they have an identity on offense. Sam Howell's not good, but,
you can figure that team, if they get more chemistry, they can at least put up decent passing games. This Giants team, yikes. And for a team that looked so promising last year, they were building something. I was starting to get a little warmed up to them as this offseason kind of, makes you feel a little bit better about teams to start drinking the Kool-Aid. But man, that's a hot shot of black coffee right in your face with that type of performance. But hey, I mean, they're in some trouble in this NFC East. But speaking of the NFC East, we have your previous NFC East champions, your Philadelphia Eagles, taking on the Vikings in Philadelphia for Thursday night football, Laraib. The Eagles are favored by 7 points at home. We saw this game week 2 last year as well, and it did not go well for the Vikings, who were already off to a rough start. What happens in this game, Laraib?
I think it's more of the same from last year, Lewis. Speaking of drinking the Kool-Aid, I drank the Kool-Aid on the Vikings last year, and I'm not doing it this year. I know this Eagles team struggled a little bit on the road, Lewis, against Bill Belichick, but I think when they face up against this Vikings team, who really only have, who didn't look too promising on offense albeit a great Buccaneers defense who looked amazing on Sunday. But I think this one, the Eagles just overpower that Vikings defense. You talk about what Baker Mayfield did to them. Now just imagine what Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown are going to do with Jalen Hurts running on the ground. Now, I will say, Lewis, a little bit of a question mark with this Eagles rushing attack. They were really, really good last year, but they kind of got stifled on the road against the Eagles. And they bring in DeAndre Swift. They bring in, former Seahawk Rashad Penny. But it was Kenneth Gainwell, really, who was getting most of the work. And so we'll see how that kind of pans out for them, Lewis. But I think in this one, they'll be good to go on the offensive side of the ball. And the defense, we saw Jalen Carter just kind of take over that game early, Lewis. And if you can have some of that same success, him, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, all those guys they still have on the defensive side of the ball, I think the Eagles get it done in this one. Now, 7 spread, Lewis, I think that's kind of big for this one. And they might be kind of basing it off of last year's game. But I think in this one, I'll pick the Eagles for sure. But I think the Vikings cover, I'm going to say 27-21.
Yeah, the biggest thing that concerns me about this line is I didn't really like what I saw outside of the pick six from this Eagles secondary. You lose Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and you lose kind of a lot of the depth, Marcus Epps, a lot of the quality starters you had in that secondary room last year. And that's what happens to deep playoff teams. You lose a lot of the guys on the edges. And you saw in that game, Mac Jones threw for over 340 yards. Now, it took him 54 pass attempts because they were down. They were trying to get back into it. But, I mean, they still, they drove the field a few times. They made it a pretty scary game. And this front seven was good for the Eagles. Don't get me wrong. But to still have a guy like Mac Jones throw for that many passes, that concerns me when you definitely have a much better passing attack coming into town with Kirk Cousins, with Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison looked pretty sharp for the Vikings. I want to take more of a Vikings perspective on this. They looked sharp early. Justin Jefferson was getting going. And, I mean, just what can go wrong will go wrong for the Vikings. Kirk Cousins, they're driving down the field to take a pretty big lead going into halftime after a huge Justin Jefferson catch to bring them down to the 20-yard line. And then Kirk Cousins throws an end zone interception. And, then in the second half, he has a fumble. And it's like, dang, Kirk. I mean, it was a 1:00 game at home. This is your bread and butter, man. This is the game where you go out and you drop 35 and Jay Jettis has a game of his life. And it was concerning. These are the close games that you saw the Vikings win last year. Yeah, they make it look close against a team like the Bucs, but they still pull out the win, and you're just holding your breath the entire time as Vikings fans. But they lost that game. I'm concerned about the passing defense, this secondary. This defense is rough for the Vikings. They went young, and I applaud them for that. They got rid of guys like Patrick Peterson, Eric Kendricks. It seems like they want to bring in a fresh crop of young defenders on this team, which I agree with. But against this Eagles team in Philadelphia, I just don't see it holding up. You mentioned the questions about the running game for the Eagles. Kenny Gainwell dealing with a rib injury. I feel like you probably see more out of guys like DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny in this game. But yeah, I just don't see. I would probably take the Eagles with the spread here, but I don't know. It could be a backdoor cover by Kirk Cousins trying to get in the game late. So, but I'm definitely picking the Eagles to win this one, Laraib.
Yeah, for sure. Kirk Cousins is just one of those quarterbacks in the NFL who's going to be, he's going to put up those numbers, Lewis. But when it comes down to it, probably never going to win a Super Bowl, never have one of those deep playoff runs. And you always make those little mistakes that cost you games. Like you mentioned, history says whenever a team has those really close one-score games one season, like I mentioned earlier on, they lose those games the next year. We saw this Phillip Rivers Chargers a couple of years ago where they had the amazing season one year, all those close games, Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen and Antonio Gates hooking up for those great touchdowns. And the next year, the fall from grace, which was just awful. And so I think that's what we could potentially be seeing from this Vikings team this year, especially like you mentioned, with a lot younger defense who maybe does not have the experience. So like I said, once again, I'll be taking the Eagles, but I think the Vikings have, like you said, a late backdoor cover. Give me the Eagles 27-21.
And I'm in the similar ballpark. I'm going Eagles 26-20. Vikings backdoor cover in this game. And hey, last year of Kirk Cousins' contract, Laraib, interesting questions will be rising in that Vikings building, but I'm sure that'll be a topic for another day as we conclude the First and Goal podcast, week 1 recap. We're going to be here with y'all all season long. We're going to have our predictions episode coming out probably Thursday, Friday. We'll let y'all know whenever that happens. So stay tuned in. Laraib, anything you want to say before we head out?
No, I think that's the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.